Released on July 28, 1998, Fear Factory's Obsolete sees the industrial metal band doing what they do best, crafting a dystopian, futuristic concept album telling a tale of man versus machine. This is Fear Factory's most successful album, and in many ways, their most ambitious. Produced by Fear Factory, Reese Fulber and Greg Reilly, it's Fear Factory's Obsolete. Tonight on Sounds Pretty Grim. Formed in Los Angeles, California in 1989, Fear Factory developed their own blend of industrial and metal, with a certain live energy, sounding precise without sounding programmed. Now I have to say that I think 1995's Demanufacture, produced by the great Colin Richardson, is the quintessential Fear Factory album, and probably the best place to get started with this band. But I feel like I have more to say about its follow-up, 1998's Obsolete, which sees the band experimenting with a more groovy feel, a little bit more commercial appeal, but above all, really making the most of just how tight-sounding the band had become after a couple years of extensive touring. Obsolete is the first and only Fear Factory album to be certified gold by the RIAA, so the slightly more commercial direction seems to have paid off. Although despite its reputation, I don't think it's dramatically more commercial sounding than 1995's Demanufacture. There's certainly a couple of songs that seem designed to play well on radio, but it's a full-on Fear Factory album through and through. If anything, I think that the futuristic concept album presentation, complete with screenplay formatted story, was a bit of a risk. It could have been a little too weird and kinda nerdy and obscure for an album that's supposed to be aimed at mainstream 90s metal audiences. Obsolete did seem to make a bit more of an appeal to a wider audience, with some slower, more groove-based songs and some more trendy flourishes like record scratching. But I think it's also that mainstream audiences by the late 1990s had simply developed a taste for heavier and angrier sounding music. I think that was the serendipitous combination that really lit a fire under this album. It's a fantastic record and the prime example of Fear Factory's unique brand of industrial metal. They've always had a very tight and cinematic sound to their studio albums, but that's just what the band sounds like. They have this precision as a live band. Vocalist Burton C. Bell's aggressive, guttural vocals are more biting than ever here. The more heavy vocals sound a lot more upfront and in your face, and he's also really stretching out with his melodic vocals, especially in the album's third act. Founding member and guitarist Dino Cazares sounds particularly great on this album. With the slightly more raw sound overall, the combination of the new lower guitar tuning and a more present and aggressive bass guitar performance underneath it, the guitars just sound bigger and have more power. Going with the more raw sound, the drums are much more dry and close sounding compared to 1995's Demanufacture, which had more of a big, awesomely reverberant cinematic drum sound. There's more focus on the overall feel of the band here, and the drums have more of a live tone to match. There's still that blending in of triggered samples. Fear Factory was always way ahead of the curve on metal drum production, and it's the precision and groove of founding member and drummer Raymond Herrera that always gave these highly produced metal drums a lot of life. The bass guitar gets a much more prominent role on Obsolete than on prior Fear Factory albums. It's their first album featuring bassist Christian Oldie Wolbers as their full-time studio bassist. Most of the previous album's bass tracks were played by guitarist Dino, though you hear a dramatic difference on Obsolete. Having just one great bass player putting all of their attention fully into their craft and just really committing to their role in the rhythm section really goes a long way towards giving Obsolete its lively sound. I'd say it's the bass and also the keyboards and synths that are the most distinct differences in sound between this and prior Fear Factory albums. Fear Factory has always heavily featured synth and sound design bits, but I think they sound particularly great on Obsolete. Producer Reese Fulber seamlessly interweaves the synths and sound design into each song, with none of it ever sounding pasted on or simply filling out the mix. It's given a good amount of space and it injects a lot of mood into the production. Some nice chamber strings on the final two songs as well. Altogether, I think Obsolete is the best that Fear Factory ever sounded as a unit. The band made some great stuff after this album, but this is that lightning in a bottle where they captured some real magic in that studio. Obsolete is a futuristic concept album based on a short story penned by lead singer Burton C. Bell titled Conception 5. It's pretty basic Orwell, Huxley-ish, dystopian future sci-fi stuff, a very traditional theme in concept albums. Though I think Obsolete also has this very hyper-specific late 90s cyber vibe. From a very short period in pop culture when the internet was still kinda new and our imaginations were still trying to comprehend how it was gonna change the world. This is an odd comparison, but it reminds me of David Bowie's 1995 futuristic concept album Outside. Both have this heavy 1990s cyber sci-fi vibe, with both albums telling a tale set in the future where the whole damn world is online. Musically, they're incredibly different, yet they're in the same little niche genre of pop culture sci-fi. Bell's Conception 5 story is told not only through the song lyrics, but also through screenplay formatted snippets within the album's booklet, featuring artwork by Dave McKean, who you've definitely seen his stuff somewhere. I hadn't revisited my physical copy of Obsolete in a while, and my memory of all the story stuff had kind of faded. It's sad that there isn't more demand for some standard way to preserve the full artwork and booklets digitally. As I've said in the past, the album artwork is not necessary to enjoy the music, yet can very often be a critical part of fully experiencing the album. For standout tracks, Shock is such a great opener. It really sets the tone for the album. It's that heavy Fear Factory that you know and love, but with this fresh sounding groove in the rhythm section. Edge Crusher and Descent are probably the more radio-friendly tracks in the album. Edge Crusher with a slower feel, more laid-back riffs, some very late 1990s record-scratching effects. And Descent is probably the biggest departure for the band, with a feel like a heavy alternative rock song. It's also possibly the most live-sounding song on the album. There's not a lot of synth and samples, just a bit to pad out a verse or a bridge here and there. This one's a great example of what the lineup really sounded like together in this era. The biggest hit from the album was actually a bonus track and not part of Obsolete's main program, a cover of Gary Numan's Cars, featuring Newman himself trading verses with Burton C. Bell. Normally, I'm not a fan of artists re-recording new versions of their hit songs with cool, younger bands, yet I'm oddly okay with this one. And that's coming from a Gary Numan fan. My Name is Ruin is one of my favorite songs of the past decade. I think this cover song works because it's such a great leap across genres. And even though the feel of the song is bouncy and upbeat, it still has Fear Factory's iconic sound. There's no mistaking it for the original version, it just sounds like Fear Factory. And Newman's more pop rock vocal sensibilities add a lot of life to the song, contrasting nicely with Bell's very straightforward delivery.
Here in my car, where the image breaks down, will you visit me please, if I open my door in cars? Here in my car, I know I've started to think about leaving tonight, although nothing seems right in cars.
It can be fun to revisit an older album that presented a vision of the dystopian future, and then compare that with our dystopian present. This album has such a heavy focus on the theme of technology, extending both the view and the reach of government and law enforcement. And the dire warnings from a song like Securitron, Police State 2000, about a government-run surveillance system that tracks your every movement, sounds kind of quaint today. It's funny that this 1998 album, at the time, felt like it was describing a dire vision of the future that was 25 or 50 years away, when in reality we blew way past the horrors of this one in about 4.5 to 5 years after its release. So I've always been a big fan of the albums, but I never really followed the drama and legal stuff among the band members. So I always think of Fear Factory as a band that pretty reliably puts out an album every 3 to 5 years. But holy shit, I'm reading about this stuff for the first time when I'm researching this video, and goddamn, the latter half of the history section of Fear Factory's Wikipedia page sounds like a series synopsis for a long-running Aaron spelling drama. Drawn-out legal disputes, interpersonal conflict, and they break up more often than Billy and Allison. It's not really my area of interest or expertise. I much prefer to live in a fantasy world where my favorite artists are all cool and just hang out at Ricky Rackman's house and everybody's friends. Anyway, big recommendation for both 1995's Demanufacture and 1998's Obsolete. Massively influential albums that both still sound fantastic today. Next time, Halloween season is quickly approaching, so I'll be interrupting my previous scheduling for the summer to begin production on The Sounds Pretty Grim Halloween Special. Gonna take a look at 3 great Halloween albums. There's gonna be some spooky surprises. It's gonna be a big friggin' production. I'm dreading it. That's next time on Sounds Pretty Grim.